Next, we need to talk about the concept of static versus non-static. So you, like many things, you've seen static, you've seen us use static variables and static methods like the main method. And to understand classes and objects, starting to understand what static is and static versus non-static and how it works is important. It's a bit of an abstract concept that will take some getting used to. But let's go ahead and jump in. So a static variable, basically, or method, is some kind of method that is not related to any one object of that class. So for instance, let's go create some static examples. So static. I've got bad naming practices here. I've got one that's uppercase, and OOP I think works, but at least let's get classes to lowercase. So I'm just going to create a Okay, I had a quick confusion there. Basically, I'm using a Java keyword here, static, which I'm not allowed to use anywhere other than, funnily enough, anywhere other than as a Java keyword in a Java file. So the package name with static in it doesn't work. So I'm going to refactor that into, let's go with static examples. Do refactor. And now I can say new Java class. And let's just call it static controller. So we've all seen the main method, and the next section here is on methods, and I'm going to dig into exactly what the main method is. But inside the main method, or in the main method definition or declaration, there's this word static, right? And the main method is static because the JVM needs to be able to call this method without creating an instance, an object of this method first. And this will make more sense in a second. We could also have other non-static methods where we just don't say static. And we can make, I'll do a couple different examples here. Void is the return type. So I'm just going to say sout static method, sout non-static method. And the way it works, and like I said, it takes a little bit of getting used to, but you'll get used to it, is static methods and variables don't belong to any one object of that class. They belong to the class itself, and that's a kind of a abstract thing to say, but it'll start to make sense. So from within a static method, I can call another static method. So I can just say static method, right? And I can run this, and it'll run, and it'll print out static method down here. Wait for it. Cool, and it ran. It's not possible for me to call the non-static method from a static context. And it'll say non-static method cannot be referenced from a static context. That's because this non-static methods, and there's, again, static and non-static applies to both methods and variables. We're talking about just methods right now. It means that they're methods that are called on an instance of a class. They're called on an object. They're not called on the class itself. So in order to be able to call this non-static method, I have to, and this is a little funny, but I'm going to make an object of this very class that I'm in called static controller, and I'll call it sc equals new static controller. And then I can say sc dot non-static method, because non-static methods can only be called on an object, right? So this doesn't make very much sense here at all, but let's do another example. So let's create a class dog. And I'm going to create I'll just to give it a couple attributes, a string name, right? Notice that this is not static. So every object or instance of this class dog that I create will have its own copy of this name, but we'll get to variables in a second. And here I'm going to make a, let's just make a public static void print class name, for instance. And we're going to say sout dog. And then I'm going to create another one that says it's a non-static, it's public string, so this method returns a string. Oops. And it's going to be called get name, and it's just going to return the name of the dog. So return name. So over here in our static controller, and I'll get rid of this, I'm going to create an instance of a dog, or for instance, I could say sout dog dot print class name. And oh, I should have this just, I don't have to say sout over here. I can just say dog dot print class name. I don't need to make an object of the dog class. I just have to say dog, which is the name of the class, and then I can call its static method, right? Or I can make an object of the dog class. So I can say dog puppy equals new dog. And then I can say puppy dot, and why don't we have the dog, we'll have a constructor on here that takes a name. So when I create the dog, I'll actually pass the name. And then I'll say, what are we doing the dog? This returns a string. Why don't I just have it printed out too? Here I can say puppy dot, and instead of print name, let's get name, let's call that print name. How about print dog's name? Because it's not the class, it's not related to the class, this is a non-static variable. So it's actually going to be related to the object itself. So this will be now print dog's name. Now I cannot say, for instance, even after I've created the puppy, I cannot say puppy, I cannot say dog dot print dog's name. That won't work because print dog's name is a non-static method, and non-static methods refer to objects of that class that have been created. So when I created this class this object called puppy, and I said puppy dot, and I gave puppy a name, puppy, and I say puppy dot print dog's name, it's actually speaking to that particular object of that class that was created. And for instance, whether it was a Ford or a Chevy or a Toyota, like it would print variables that are associated with the individual object, not with the class itself. Right? And so I can't at the class level say dog with a capital D, meaning the class, dot print dog's name, which is a non-static method. Let's test if I can say puppy dot print class name. I can actually call a static method from a non-static context. So basically I can still call this from the object, but not the other way around. So again, we cannot say dog dot print dog's name. It just doesn't work because print dog's name is available to objects of that class, not to the class itself. So let's take another look at that. Let's look at, I'm going to create a static variable. I think the variables help to, and this is going to be num dogs created. And then in the constructor, we're going to, every single time the constructor is called, we're going to increment num dogs created, right? And so here I'll create a couple more dogs. These are childhood dogs of mine. And down here, I'm going to say dog dot, I'm going to print it out, sout dog dot num dogs created. Because this variable is static, it's not it's not related to any one object of the class. It's related to the class itself. So since I am incrementing this numdogs created variable every time this constructor is called, what's going to print here is 3. Well, dog.class, because I said dog.print class name, and 3. And so that basically that numdogs created variable is available at the class level, right? And unlike if I was to say sout, puppy dot name, sout any dot name, sout. So that prints out puppy, Annie, curly, because those variables name, that variable name is not static. So that is related to the object itself. So I've created 3 different objects. Each object had a different name value for the name variable. And so since that variable is non-static, I can print out, for instance, the name of this object, the name of this object, the name of this object. Static variables do not work that way, and static methods do not work that way. They're not related to any one object of that class. Where this makes some more sense too, for me at least, is in the math class. So let's take math, like int x equals right. So should we need to make an object of the math class in order to use the multiply method? I don't think so, right? Like the multiply method, or another one is, you could say like double pi equals math dot pi. This is a static variable. It's also a final variable, meaning it can't be changed because pi is not up for debate. But these things are static because I shouldn't have to create an object of the math class in order to use the multiply method, or in order to get access to the value for pi. They're not related to any one object of the math class, right? And funnily enough, the math constructor is private. You actually can't make this is not many classes are like this, but it's not possible to make an object of the math class. Like I can't say math m equals new math because the constructor is private. Math has private access. So every single variable and method in the math class is static because it's not like a dog. The dog object or the dog class, you're going to make many instances of that dog class or car class or vehicle class, and each one of them is going to have their own unique variables and methods that act on those unique variables. Those are all non-static. When it comes to things where you should not make an object, like the math class, or where you need to be able to access it without an object involved, then that is static. So this will make more sense as you progress. If you have any questions, always reach out. I'm happy to keep explaining this. It's a little tricky to first wrap your head around. That being said, we do most of our work in a non-static context when we're working in object-oriented programming. And in order to get out of a static context, all you need to do is create an object. So let's say that you've got this public static void main. If I am to create, even just say right here, I could make this in order to get out of a static context, all you need to do is create a object and call a non-static method on it. So here I can just say sc.non-static method. And now from here, I can call any non-static, I can call non-static variables, non-static methods. I can do lots of non-static things because I'm actually in the realm of the object, not at the class level. So it's a little tricky, but if you find yourself stuck in a static context, rather than just making everything static, start getting comfortable with making objects and then using those objects to call those non-static methods or access those non-static variables.